come from behind us, it did. No, up there, don't be daft. He's up in them bushes. I tell you, I saw him. They all pointed in different directions at the edge of the cliff. It's all right, Albert, called the eldest Snarget again. It's no use you hiding yourself up there. We're coming up to get you. But this didn't worry Barney either. By the time they got to the top, he would be well away. The Snargets must have thought this too, because they didn't make a move. They retired inside their rickety shack instead. Barney scored another direct hit on it and a near miss. Heads popped out each time and looked around fiercely, but he was too well hidden and they failed to spot him. But there seemed to be a lot of whispering going on in the shack, and then all three Snargets came out and started walking towards the way out. The eldest called over his shoulder in a casual voice, "Goodbye, Albert," and the other two repeated it. "We're going home now, Albert," called the eldest. "It's our dinner time. But listen here, Albert, we know you're up there. Just keep your hands off our shack, see? We got something in there that's valuable. We just dare you to meddle with it, that's all." The Snargets walked off towards the way out the pit, whistling loudly and banging tins with sticks. Barney waited until he could hear their feet on the lane dying away. Funny, he thought, they've gone. Still, perhaps it is their dinner time. He came out from behind his tree and went round the edge of the pit to the low side and walked along the bottom to the shack that the Snargets had built. He wondered what the valuable thing was that they'd left in it. There didn't seem to be anything except a paper bag full of chestnut conkers. "Pfft, silly conkers," said Barney aloud. "They're not valuable." Perhaps they'd buried something. He dug around in the mossy floor and unearthed a very rusty tin box. It had writing on the outside. He could just make out the letters. "Gold block," it said. It felt heavy. Ought he open it or not? He decided he would. There was no harm in just looking. The hinged lid was rusted to the bottom and wouldn't move. He banged at it with a stone, and out fell a rusty mass of screws and nuts and bolts and curtain rings. Inside the lid of the box was more writing, which said that the gold block was the finest pipe tobacco made from choice Virginia leaf. Barney threw the tin away in disgust, and a voice said, "All right, mister, come out. We've got you covered." It was the Snargets. They played a trick on him and crept back. He came out of the shack and faced the Snargets. One had a broken down old air gun, and the others were pointing sticks. "Caw! It ain't Albert," exclaimed the youngest Snarget. "We can see that," said the oldest roughly. "What's your name?" he said to Barney in the same voice. Barney," said Barney. "What's yours?" "I'm the Lone Ranger, and he's Robin Hood, and he's William Tell," snapped the eldest Snarget. "Golly!" exclaimed Barney. "Quiet!" snapped the first Snarget. "What was you doing in our shack?" "Yes, and what do you mean by chucking dirt at us?" asked the second Snarget. "Yeah, and what you doing in our dump, anyway?" piped the youngest fiercely. "Can do what I want," replied Barney, pretending not to mind. But he was not really feeling very comfortable. He was not sure how rough these Snargets could get. "Can if he wants to, he says," exclaimed the Lone Ranger, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "What shall we do with him, fellas?" "Tie him to a tree and shoot him full of arrows," suggested Robin Hood. "Put him in a dungeon and leave him to rot," said William Tell. "Nah, I reckon we ought to lynch him on the spot. String him up," said the Lone Ranger masterfully. "We ain't got no rope," said Robin Hood. "Well, we ain't got no bows and arrows," pointed out William Tell. "Well, there certainly ain't no dungeon for miles around," said the Lone Ranger. "Let's just give him a bit of slow torture." "You wouldn't dare," said Barney, but he didn't feel so sure. "Oh, wouldn't we?" sneered the Lone Ranger. "That's what you think. We often do it, don't we, fellas? Do it all the time, don't we? Give people the slow torture." "Yes, and shoot 'em full of arrows," agreed Robin Hood. "And put 'em in dungeons," added William Tell. "I'd tell a policeman," said Barney stoutly. The eldest Snarnet looked carefully around the pit. "Can't see no policeman here," he said scornfully. "I'd tell my granny, and she lives just up there," said Barney. And the Snarkits collapsed in howls of laughter. "He tell his granny," he says. "Hear that, fellas? He tell his granny." They cackled. Barney felt his face going red and tears coming into his eyes. And then he thought of something. "I'm going to tell Stig," he said calmly. The laughter went on. "Oh, he's going to tell his Stig," cackled the Snargits. But Barney just stood there and smiled, and the laughter gradually died away. "Who's Stig?" the eldest Snargit asked suspiciously. "Oh, a friend of mine," replied Barney airily. "God, there ain't no such person," said the second doubtfully. "Yes, there is, and he's my friend," said Barney. "Where's he live?" squeaked the smallest Snargit. "Here," said Barney. "Here?" chorused the Snargit scornfully. "What, in the dump?" the eldest Snargit said, and they all laughed as if he'd made a joke. "Yes," said Barney. "Didn't you know?" "Go on, you gone off, tell him," said the second. "What's he do? Tell us that then." "He makes bows out of television aerials and arrows out of bits of flint," replied Barney. The Snargits gaped at him with open mouths. "Look here," said the eldest at last. "This here Stig of yours, what is he then? A boy or a man?" Barney had to think a little before he answered, and then, "He's a caveman," he said. At once the Snargits burst into jeers. "Ha ha ha ha!" and laughter again. "You soppy old caveman, he's got it out of school book. He's pulling our legs, making out he knows a caveman. Come on, fellas, let's do him. Slow torture," they cried. But Barney leapt off the pile of rubble he was standing on and set off at a run towards the other end of the pit. The Snargits were after him, with shrill cries. "He's off! Get him, fellas! Yeah, chicken! Run away, will ya?" Barney jumped fallen trees and burst through banks of nettles without caring for the stings. He knew the bottom of the pit better than the Snargits, and he seemed to be leaving them behind. And then he heard the voice of the eldest. "Take it easy, fellas. He can't get out of this end of the pit. Spread out so he don't double back." But Barney did not mean to double back. As quietly as he could, so that his pursuers could not hear him through the nettle banks and elder trees, he made for the entrance to Stig's den, flung himself through the low doorway, and collapsed puffing and blowing and pleased with himself on the floor of the cave. Stig was there, busy making himself a really horrible-looking club out of a tree root, into which he was fixing bits of flint and broken glass and rusty nails. "Hello, Stig," panted Barney. "I'm jolly glad to see you." But when he saw the horrible club, he began to feel almost sorry for the Snargits. He couldn't set this monster onto the three little boys who hadn't done anything to him yet. It may have been only a game after all. You never could tell with the Snargits. Barney just smiled uncertainly at Stig, and Stig returned a friendly grin.